soon as we hear from our other location, they can see us. We'll get started. She says no. Yes. They're schizophrenic, yes. Okay. We are ready to go. And we'll verify, watch if there's any problems. Okay. We are live here at Pursuit. This is the Single Mom KC. I'm Lori. I'm the program director for the Single Mom KC and want to welcome my moms here at Colonial Presbyterian Church. Welcome our moms watching over at Life Mission Church. I'll be there next month with you guys. And then we also want to welcome our YouTube audience who will watch us at various times. So this is our monthly program. First Wednesday of every month at 6:30, you can join us. Or watch us anytime on YouTube. So I'm so excited about tonight, and we are just grateful that the weather cleared out enough that we're able to gather together. So we're kind of sick of all this snow and ice, right, everyone? We're really sick of it. Before we get started tonight, I just always like to share some announcements. And if you're watching us for the first time on YouTube, you're welcome to join us. If you want any information, we are the Single Mom KC. And just email us at info@thesinglemomkc.org. And we will be glad to get back with you. So moms that are in person, you have a booklet. And what I want you to do is to pull out all the paperwork in the middle of your book. And I'm going to walk you through that. If you're watching us live and you'd like any of the materials from tonight, just email us and we will get that for you. But first, I just want to share some announcements of some upcoming programs. So next month, our Pursuit, Wednesday, April 2nd, our program will be Finding Joy Through God's Word. And I don't know, you can Google woman. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I should have written it down. This wonderful publishing company has given us beautiful prayer journals for every mom, and they are so beautiful. And what we're going to do is whether you are a believer in Jesus Christ or not, you're going to find these journals beneficial. But our program specifically will be just to help you be able to just take a little snippet of a Bible passage and just kind of ponder and meditate and pray on it to help you find joy. And the speaker is going to be me because I just love to share and equip. If you know me at all, you know I love to share and equip moms in how to find joy and how to find joy in the Lord and in the Word. So come, invite your friends. We've got a whole lot of these. We've been so blessed by this company. They love single moms. And so come and get your journal and then learn how to just refresh and find joy through God's Word. So would love to have you for that. As if you've been with us regularly, you know that the very first workshop you need to go through in our Pathway program, our program Pathway, is our Victim to Victorious workshop. So we have first Wednesday of the month Pursuit every month, and then we have occasional Saturday workshops. And so a lot of you are registered for Victim to Victorious. It is Saturday, March 15th. You can see in your packet a QR code. You can register for that if you would like to go. If you have already attended and already participated in that workshop, then there are other workshops this year that will present healthy boundaries and raising victorious kids. And the prerequisite is to go through Victim to Victorious to be able to then go through healthy boundaries and raising victorious kids. Financial stability we just had in February. So would encourage you to do that. And if you have already gone through Victim to Victorious, but you have not yet gone through our healing from your heart wounds at workshop, I encourage you to register for that, and that will be April. Friday night, let me tell you about that. That is the only thing we do where we do not provide childcare in children's programs. And the reason for that is that workshop is 5:30 to 9 Friday night, and then 8:30 to 6 p.m. Saturday. It's meant for you to retreat and walk away from your kids. And if you need help, we've got a partner organization that you can sign up to hopefully get your kids covered. But that workshop is about walking through and identifying significant life wounds. So trauma, but trauma doesn't just mean that you've been in a violent relationship. Trauma is just a significant life change. And it's beautiful, it's scripture-based, and being together with a group of women facilitated by a trained team that take you all the way through Friday night and all day Saturday. You walk away refreshed and springboarded in your journey of healing from trauma. So would encourage you to go through that, register for that if you have not already gone through that. And those are our upcoming workshops. So now let's get into a little bit about tonight. We have a phenomenal, those of you that are regular with us, children's ministry director who always gives you tools on any topic that we're doing to take home and use with your kids. And our topic tonight is, if the unexpected happens, will your kids be taken care of? And I want to tell you, the information tonight will apply to those of you that have adult children, as well as those that are raising children, because if something significant happens to you, no matter the ages of your children, they're going to have to take care of things, or they're going to, get the fallout. So this workshop is good for all. But our children's ministry tonight, your kids that are there are up through 5th grade, are working on learning their phone numbers and their mom's full names and information that is important if there would be an emergency that they would need to answer. And then in your packet, and we'll bring these to you at the end of the evening, but you have a packet of take-home activities. Our children's director always gives you, there's a handout stapled to the next page of what or in your packet, it's by itself, that has an overview of what the kids are being taught, our dream curriculum tonight. On the back side, lots of QR codes. We just really encourage you to do activities with your kids. And so that's for you. And then in this wonderful packet, you have laminated, including markers, emergency phone numbers. You should, spend time working with your kids and fill this information out and put it on the refrigerator. Yes, thank you. Ann's going to bring me a drink of water. I'm sorry. They also have personal safety information for each child. Nothing like being live on TV and coughing. And then this one is really cool. Emergency contacts. So you should walk through this with your children. And if you have grown children, fill them out anyway. And put these on your refrigerator so they're visible where everyone can get to them in case of an emergency. Is that cool? Very important. Do you already have that done? No. That's why we're giving it to you tonight to do. So that's pretty special. So now I want to show you, if you will look through this book. We are providing a place for you to write all significant information. You may not want to fill out every little part of this book, but you're going to find that your bank accounts, your emergency contacts, your family members that should be notified in the event of an emergency. There's a page on guardianship over your kids, the contacts if something would happen with your kids, all sorts of things. This is a project to start working on, and I just seriously implore you to really put your information down on paper. And to help prompt that, thank you, Ann. Oh, I bumped my head. Such a klutz. To help prompt that, on our take-home journal page, you can see that in your packet, we show you which sections we should suggest you start first. The most important, like in a quick hit. So that's a project to do to take home. What do you think about that? That's pretty cool, isn't it? Yes, it is. It's very cool, and you need to get it done. And then keep this out, and I want everyone to have a pen. Pascal, our speaker, will be going through the information in this packet. And what I suggest you do is take notes and also write down your questions, because when we go off camera, Pascal will be here in my location answering questions, and then we'll have Colleen over in our other location answering questions. So if what we're going to go through tonight, if it might be confusing, it's new information, you might need something clarified, write notes so you'll be able to remember when we go off camera and ask questions. So that's the material for tonight. So I want to talk a minute about how we came to this topic of what to do if the unexpected happens with your kids. Last summer, for the first time since I've been involved with the Single Mom KC, we lost 2 mothers. Both died unexpectedly of health complications that came up really rapidly. One left 5 children. The other left 3 children. One left her 5 kids to her 71-year-old aunt, who happened to be a very godly woman that came in and said, "I will take these children on." When she went to enroll them in school, they would not let her enroll because she didn't know where the birth certificates were. Nothing was set. Their benefits that they had been on, she didn't know where any of the paperwork was. And imagine getting 5 kids when you are already retired on a limited income. It would have been helpful to know all the information on the benefits the kids were receiving and have all that in hand to go and get her information. The other situation is very similar. A grandma got the kids, but nothing was in place. Not custody, not guardianship, not even where the bank accounts, not even what was left in the bank account, anything like that. So the reason that we believe this topic is so important tonight is I just want to implore every single mom to put in writing and get things in place, so if there would be a disaster, because it is a disaster, and something happens to you, you would know, you could at least be at peace that your kids, you did the very best you could for someone to know what your desires are and what your provisions are for their kids. So that is why we are here tonight, and I am extremely thrilled to have a friend of the Single Mom KC for many years. I met Pascal when I started volunteering, even before I was on staff with the Single Mom KC. And so she has been a friend, and her law firm is a friend of the Single Mom KC. And after Pascal speaks, by the way, like I said, we'll go offline and then we'll have question and answer time. I do want to, before I turn it over, introduce officially and turn over to Pascal, I do want to clarify some things. Pascal is here to present the workshop to help you understand what you need to have in order, and to even provide you some resources that you can go on your own to complete things. But what she cannot do, and what she is not here to do, nor is her partner Colleen over at Life Mission, is to give you legal advice on your personal situations. That would be a conflict of interest for her. So the information presented tonight is for informational purposes only, does not constitute legal, financial, or tax advice. We've got to help her stay ethical. So keep your questions to yourself. Our speakers will answer questions regarding the information that they are presenting, but they will not be able to give any legal advice. I've repeated myself a couple of times just by design. So please craft your questions around the material presented. And then additionally, they are not responsible for the accurate. One of the things that Pascal shared with me as we were preparing for this is laws are different in Kansas, different in Missouri, and they change and adjust. So she may give you a little bit more wording, but just know that the information provided is educational, but not meant for you personally to be used. And she's a lawyer, so she's got better language on that. She can tell you that. So in her own words, hope I didn't mess it up too bad, Pascal. So now to our friend Pascal Hinn. She's an experienced business lawyer who founded her firm, Business Law Advisors, to help clients grow their businesses from a sound and legal and business perspective. I can't believe this, but her bio says for over 30 years. You just can't be doing it that long. She's advised business clients from Fortune 500 multinationals to closely held family businesses to startups. Her experience is vast, and she is just very, very well connected in the Kansas City area. And in addition to that, she's a mother of 4 young adults and loves to travel with them and spend time overseas. Pascal's also a runner and a yoga enthusiast, so she is just multifaceted. So please join me in welcoming Pascal Hen.
Well, I've got glasses now at this age, so I'm going to take them up on. So I've been practicing for a long time in Kansas City. I've been a friend of the single mom for over 10 years. But I want to start by telling you how much I respect each of you, because I was a single mom for years, and I don't know if there's a more difficult thing to do than to raise kids by yourself. And this is probably a great example of doing one more thing that's very difficult, and you're doing it by yourself. And there's probably nothing scarier than to think, as hard as this is to do on my own, I can't imagine what happens when I'm not here. So that's why this is so near and dear to my heart, as well as I'm sure when we go through this, it will be yours as well. One of the things that, and the packet is in your, and we don't have the ability to put this up on the screen, so we'll walk through this, kind of old school. We'll walk through the packet together. But one of the things I guess I want to let you know is it's very dense. The law is complicated. It changes from state to state. So as Lori was saying, Colleen and I are not, she's over on the Kansas side, we're not going to be able to give you specific legal advice. It's not that we wouldn't want to. It's just everyone's situation is different, and it's just beyond the scope of what we can do here today. But what I do want you to take away from here is there are things that you can do without a lawyer that can help facilitate if, the worst thing happens, if something happens to you. And so that can help make this less disruptive to your family. And then, of course, we'd encourage you to get with an attorney if you can. And one of the things Lori and I have talked about is I'm going to see if we can't find some estate planning attorneys that specifically might commit to either providing services or, there's always legal aid and other things. But just to make you aware of some of the topics and then some of the things we can do to make your untimely passing less disruptive to your family. So to start that, I'm going to start on page 1. I'm going to try not to read too much, but I am going to need my glasses. So first we're going to start with what? What is an estate? And you hear a lot of times estates and trusts, and those are legal terms. And your estate really just means everything that you own, and at your passing, what the court will do with what you own and the other legal arrangements you have in your life, which does include your minor children. So it just means vehicles, if you have a home, if you have bank accounts, if you have cash, personal possessions, if you have retirement accounts with an employer, all of those things are part of your estate. So that's kind of the umbrella. The reason the estate planning is important is because the law is going to have rules about what happens to each of those things and how they are either passed to someone that you design they pass to, or the court decides they're going to decide where your assets are going to go or how they're going to be used. And as importantly, what happens with your kids if you have minor kids. So that's why it's important to have some planning in place so that you have a say in what happens to, frankly, everything that you've accumulated in your life. And that also includes pets. You can also help direct the court or help direct what happens to your pets. So on page 2, these are some of the misconceptions about estate planning. Often people, and I'll just kind of read through these, Estate planning is only for the wealthy. So if I don't have a lot of money or I don't, own a home, why is this that important? Well, it is important for everyone, and perhaps as important, if not more important, if you have limited resources and you're not sure my kids are going to stay in a home, or is there going to be a vehicle to take care of them, or who's going to take care of them? I'm too young to need an estate plan is the second bullet. I think we probably all know someone who passed way before you would have expected it. And usually when you are in your early adulthood, mid-adulthood, that's probably the time where you're least equipped or have put the least amount of planning in place, and it's probably the most disruptive. You have probably less financial stability, and you've got kids that are more dependent on you. So it's really never too early. A will is all I need. A will is important, and we're going to talk about the difference between wills and estates, trusts, and then we're also going to talk about what they call beneficiary designations. There's a lot of technical words in this area of the law, and we'll break that down. There's some things that we can do outside of wills that will help your assets pass directly. There's also healthcare directives, and that is what happens to me if I go into the hospital, who gets to make those decisions, what happens at end of life, who gets to make those decisions. So those are also documents that are related to your estate planning. Once I make an estate plan, I'm done. So sometimes we have some planning done, but it may change. You may have more children than you did when you made your first estate plan. You may have a different living arrangement. Things can change. You may have gone through a divorce since you had an estate plan in place. All of those things are going to affect both the status of the assets and what will happen, what the law is going to say is going to happen to those assets. I don't have enough in assets to justify estate planning, and by assets we just mean everything you own. Again, it can mean in many ways every asset you have is going to be important at any stage of your life to make sure that it passes as it needs to. My family knows my wishes, so I don't need a formal plan. Well, the reality is sometimes people don't do what we expect them to do. We all know stories of families that are destroyed by fights over estates. People who take things out of the house, people who take money, people who don't do what someone had wished, as well as even if everybody wants to, it doesn't mean the law will support the passing of those assets the way the family wanted to. And then estate planning is only for distributing assets after I die. There are things we can do to plan so that before you pass or right at your passing, things can automatically pass. And if we've done that in advance, that helps to facilitate that. On page 3, excuse me. Lori, it must be contagious up here because I'm starting to cough. Why is it important? And we've just kind of talked about it. It ensures that your wishes are followed. It protects your assets and your loved ones. The things are going to happen after you pass when you're no longer here to ensure that happens. We're going to talk in a minute about the difference between probate and trusts and other strategies to have assets passed directly. Probate is when your assets go through the court system. It can be very slow, and that can mean, for example, in Lori's example, if you had 5 kids, they need to be fed, they need to live someplace, they need to go to school, they need to go to the doctor. All of those things need to happen, and if the court is going to take 3 to 6 months to catch up with you, who cares? That's not timely enough. So avoiding probate is ideal, as well as the costs. If you are in court, you most likely have to have a lawyer, or at least you want a lawyer to help advise you. So if we can avoid that, even better. If you have a small business, I don't know if any of you are business owners or you're contractors or you work for yourself, Estate plan can make sure that your business will transfer to whoever you would want to pick it up, and to take over and being able to just go to the bank and get the money out of the bank. And then the other thing that sometimes doesn't come up as often as we should is incapacity. And by that I mean if something happens to you physically, either mentally or physically, where you're not able to care for yourself and you're not able to make decisions. And in some ways, incapacity can be even more devastating in some ways than a death, because now your physical health is in jeopardy, and you're in this limbo land because the court has to decide how to take care of you, and then we have to decide what happens with your kids, and that can be doubly stressful and disruptive, obviously. So incapacity is another part of what we plan for. So on page 4, there's some bullets about, and these are legal documents. Again, unfortunately, this area of the law is very old, and it has lots of language that is basically legalese. So when somebody says, what's a beneficiary designation, you could say, that's a transfer on death, or that's a POD at my bank account. But they have words that are often just legalese, and so it's hard to recognize some of the things that they stand for. So we're just going to go through. The last will and testament is that piece of paper. It's a document that, and it kind of goes back to like the old movies, like the old westerns, people would have like a will, and it would be this piece of paper that you would take to court, and it has a gold seal on it, and it has ribbons, and there's a big ceremony around it. And it is still kind of that way even today. It is a document, and there's a lot of formality around it. It has to be, depending on the state, signed with witnesses. There has to be, and only certain people can be witnesses. And it has to be with original signatures. And there's a lot of formality around it because, as you can imagine, a fraudulent will after someone has passed would be very difficult to prove. How do you prove that that wasn't the one that you signed? So there's a lot of formality around it. So that's a last will and testament. And that is something that goes to the court, and the court says, yep, that's a real will. This was her signature, and this is what she wanted to have happen. So that's one document. A trust is a little bit different. And sometimes you hear about trusts. Not everyone needs them. Not everyone uses them. But often you'll hear about a trust, which is a document that manages assets, money, property, outside of the court system. And sometimes you'll hear like minors can't manage their own assets. So if you were to leave money to your kids or for the care of your children, if you don't have a trust, the court's going to put it in a trust. And there's going to be a trustee, and that's going to be a person who's really important, because that person gets to make the decisions subject to the trust about what happens with the money and the property in that trust. So that could mean that person gets to decide if the beneficiaries, the people, usually your children, who are going to benefit from that, do they get to go to play soccer? Do they get school clothes? Do they get it? Literally, that person gets to decide what happens to that money. So who that is very important. So that and that can be done before your passing. That can be done so that you know exactly what happens when money goes in here. Often people will say, even if you have adult kids, I don't have this situation, but I have friends who do. You've got one kid who's got a substance problem. You don't want them to get money that's unsupervised. It is not healthy for them, and it's not going to be there very long. So you can have an adult child that has a trust, and it says, a trustee is going to make decisions about their care, their education, their welfare, but I'm not going to turn this money over them directly. I'll pay their rent, but I'm not going to give them money. That kind of a thing. Powers of attorney are documents where you either for a period of time or for permanently have said, if something happens to me, I'm going to give this person the ability to sign my legal, to step in my shoes legally. So They can sign documents for you. And it's not like one kind of power of attorney. It can be for financial affairs. Sometimes if you have aging parents, you'll see this. And it'll be, I get to sign, I'm going to sign mom's, legal documents, or I'm going to take care of her expenses, where she stays, or I'm going to make sure I make her car payment, or whatever you have. This gives you power. It's like you have their signature, and it can be for finances. It can be, and you'll see when we get to that slide, it can be for a period of time. I'm going into the hospital. I don't know what's going to happen. As long as I'm ill, I'm going to allow my sister to sign on my behalf. But she doesn't get to do it forever. It's just for a certain amount of time. But it gives another person the power to sign your name in a legal capacity. And then healthcare directives and living wills, these are kind of interchangeable. These are those documents, and you always hear, you see it on TV, or you hear a statement where somebody gets, or you have it in your own family, somebody has a healthcare condition, or they're in a terrible accident and they're put on a machine. Then who gets to make decisions about their healthcare? Or they've been in an accident and they're unconscious. Who is the person who gets to make decisions until either they've recovered, or, God forbid, you have to make a tough decision about whether or not you keep them on certain levels of life support. And then the last one is beneficiary designations. Again, this is a legal term, and what that really means is, in the event of my death, who is my beneficiary? So who benefits from that? And that's where we'll go through that slide. But this can be where sometimes you go and open a bank account, and they'll say, do you want to put a transfer on death or a pay on death on this account? And this person will be your beneficiary. And it will immediately transfer on your death to this person. It won't go through court, but that's called a beneficiary designated. I've designated you as the person it's going to transfer. You get to be my beneficiary. So now we'll drill down a little bit. Some of this is kind of a snooze fest, but unfortunately, it's important to know what these are. So this is on page 5. And these are kind of the pillars of the legal instruments or tools that we have when a person passes. The wills, and we can go through, a will is a binding document that says, these are my wishes for my assets and for my kids. Probably all single moms in particular are going to want to have a will, because the will covers the guardianship of your minor kids. You can't do it with a trust. There's no other document. That's what's going to tell the court what you want to have happen to your children in the event that something happens to you. And so we'll go through, it also can cover your assets, but there's some other ways to get assets to pass. But the will is going to take care of whatever hasn't passed immediately, and then what happens with your kids. So there's kind of 5 things here that wills cover. Distributes assets according to your wishes. So this is the document that says, hey, judge, I want my mom's wedding ring to go to my daughter. And this is, and it can be lists of specific things, or it can say, I want my bank accounts to go to my sister. I know she's going to take care of the kids. It goes through and it takes your assets and tells the court who you want to have responsibility and care for those. It also, it also appoints an executor. And that's just a legal name for who is going to take charge of this. Not that the court's not going to do it, but who's going to be the person who's organized, who's trustworthy, who will take on this responsibility, which is not fun, and it can be and you want somebody who's going to be able to be responsible and do a good job at this and do what you have indicated is important to you. That you have to designate who that person is. And if you don't, the court will. And so you'd like to have control of who that is. It will also name, number 3, it'll name the guardians for your kids. If it's not in the will, the court is going to name a guardian. And that may or may not be who you want. Now, one caveat there, you are all responsible, moms, because you're in this room tonight. Not everybody does as good a job, and they may say, I want my boyfriend of 3 weeks to be the guardian of my kids. Well, that may not be the best person to be the guardian of your kids. So the court doesn't have to necessarily follow who you've put on in your will, but one of the things you can do is also attach a letter that says, this is why this is important. This aunt of mine has been there since the kids were babies, is the person that they know. They stay with her when I'm gone. They have a long-term relationship. She's raised children. She raised, her other kid. Whatever your reasoning is, it helps the court understand your reasoning. What you would like to do is have as much control as possible of what that determination is. If it's in the will, the judge, unless really thinks you had bad judgment for some reason or something has changed, is going to follow your intent. You also want to have a secondary guardian or a contingent guardian if this person's not capable. So sometimes what people will say, well, it's going to be my parents. Well, what happens if your parents don't survive you? Or that person is no longer in a situation where they can take it on. So you usually want to designate a guardian and then a contingent guardian. This also, having a will reduces the legal complications and the probate delays. Again, you're giving the judge a roadmap that says this is the way, here's where all my assets are. We don't have to go dig stuff up, which is one of the great things about the materials that you have. It's a heck of a lot of work to make a list of your assets and your bank accounts and your credit cards and your Venmo and your emergency numbers. But can you imagine having someone else do it after you've passed while they're grieving you and your kids are, beside themselves? This is the time to get that organized, and you put it all in one place. So the person that has to do that is ready. What your will does is that gives everybody a running head start because you've kept those lists together and you've said, here's some of my property or here's where you can find it. So you've done some planning. And then the fifth one, it gets to specify your funeral and your burial wishes. Depending on your background, your religious beliefs, your family traditions, that may be extremely important to you. And so you want to be sure that the way that you've planned your end of life is followed. So those are wills, and those are legal documents. A trust is also a legal document, but it's a little bit different. What it allows you to do, and there's two kinds of wills. There's a living will, which is one where you say, I'm going to form a will, and I'm going to put assets in that will now so that I know what happens to them. So and this is pretty technical. This is beyond this is where you'd want to sit down with the lawyer, and they'll help you decide if this is necessary. But this is just so that you have the background, and it'll help you make better decisions. It also means that whatever assets go into that trust, those stay out of the court proceedings. So if you want to make sure that your car, your house, your certain other assets don't go through the judge's judgment, but have already passed into the trust, that's what a trust does. It keeps it out of the probate, and it keeps it out of the discretion of anybody else because you do it during your lifetime. Those are your assets. You get to say what happens to them. So that's one of the purposes. In certain situations, and there's a little asterisk, it also can protect assets. This is where you're going to need a lawyer probably to help you with this, but there are certain types of trusts that will protect it from creditors or will protect from lawsuits, sometimes also protect from other people who might attack the will. Because sometimes in families, everybody knows this can happen, somebody says, you know what, and even if you've got adult kids and minor kids, you may have a fight within the family about where assets should go. If they go into a trust, there's no question about that. And the trust can be a living trust that you make during your lifetime, or it can be a trust that only gets activated when you pass. Again, a little more detail, more technical information than you need, but at least the concept, you know that it's out there. It manages assets for minors. So if you've got kids that are minors, you will have a trust for their support if you have assets that are going to be used. And if you don't have a trust, the court will, in the probate, create a trust for your kids. It also controls how assets are distributed. And if you have a special needs child, that's a whole nother level of complexity. If you do, that is something that, and this is where I would highly suggest you go. If you don't have the resources to work with an attorney, get to legal aid, because you should get priority. Because a child with a disability or incapacity, it not only needs to have, there's some things that you can do during your lifetime, but you sure as heck want to make sure that they're protected post, after you pass. So disabilities and incapacities. Okay, so page 6. This is where a guardianship for minor kids is probably one of the more important things that we want to talk about. The choice of a guardian is number one. Super important. This is now the kid's new parent, essentially. They're going to have all the rights of a parent. They're going to get to make all the decisions for your child. If you have a surviving parent, so if you are divorced or were never married to dad, that person, unless you designate otherwise, courts often will award guardianship to the surviving parent. That's kind of the default. If that is not a good situation, that is one of the most important reasons to be sure to get a will in place so that you can tell the court why that shouldn't default to a surviving parent. So that's something that can be very important. Again, even if it's not a surviving parent, if dad's not in the picture, or dad is in the picture but he's not responsible, or he's not he's not going to be a good parent, if you have someone else, again, think through, could this person, are they the right person to step in as a guardian? Because you are going to, your parents might be fantastic, but if they're in their 70s, that may or may not, now, you may not get that many choices, but, let's think through, are they going to be able to raise these kids all the way through majority? Parental values and lifestyle. Again, sometimes people, and you all probably can imagine, people get offended. Like, what do you mean? My aunt's going to get the kids and I'm not going to get the kids. And you're like, well, it's because I don't like your boyfriend, or I don't like your lifestyle, or you've had 6 jobs in the last 5 years. I love you, but you are not the most stable parent or guardian. So sit down and really think through who would have the values that you have and create the lifestyle that you would want. Capacity is the next bullet. Again, that person needs to have the ability to raise the kids, both physically, emotionally, mentally, and maybe even financially, if that might be a consideration. A successor guardian, if not this person, who would a good successor be? So just thinking through who else that might be. And then other considerations, again, will your kids be happy with this household? Are they going to thrive? Are they going to get to stay together? If, that's another consideration. If you have a surviving parent, are your kids going to get split up? And so that's one of the things that you want to plan for if you can, and help a judge understand. These kids have never lived with dad. These kids have always been raised together. This is why I think that would be a better guardian. Okay, financial responsibility and support. There's 2 ways of handling the financial support. If you have your finances are going to go into a trust for the kids, it doesn't mean that the person who is administering the finances has to also be the person who's the guardian. Those can be 2 separate people. Sometimes there's some checks and balances there, so that they're not putting a new hot tub in the person who's raising your kids. You may love them, but you may not be, that may or may not be the person who's the most financially responsible. Maybe you want your parents to be handling the money, but they are going to live with somebody else. That's perfectly allowable, but you just have to plan. Also, in some situations, after you pass, if there's not enough to support the kids, who would be willing and might have the financial wherewithal to step in? So those are all considerations to think about. Number 3, stability and location. You might have, my brother lives in Texas. If something happened to my kids, they love their uncle, but I don't know after they've lost their their parent, if they want to move to an entirely different household. Maybe they will have to, but is this the best choice for them? If at all possible, can they stay in the same school? Can they be in the same neighborhood? Is it the least disruptive to them? So think about some of those things. And then legal and practical aspects, again, the court's going to have to approve this choice. So think about someone who not only would be the great parent, but that you think the court is going to agree with your rationale there. Okay, and the last point there is, again, they need to be willing. You can't spring it on them. Guess what? You now get to take on 4 new kids. That's a conversation that you probably want to have with that person, and hopefully you're close enough with them that you can have it. And then the last bullet, a letter of explanation can be a part of your documents so that you get to communicate after you've passed why this choice is important. Okay, so that's guardianship. Power of attorney is on page 7. Now we're going to go back to how do we deal with the finances and the assets and the stuff. One of the reasons you can use a power of attorney, and this is, again, a legal document, it can be temporary or it can be for extended periods or for as long as a condition exists, like I'm incapacitated, I'm in the hospital, I can't make my own choices. Sometimes people put these in place just for a surgery. Like, I just want it while I'm going into the hospital for this specific period of time. You can have powers of attorney just for financial affairs. You can have a power of attorney just for healthcare decisions. And then we'll talk a little bit more about that. Just for if you're completely incapacitated. So not just if I broke my leg, all of a sudden you take over all my checking accounts. It has to be defined when you have the ability to take it over. It helps avoid having the court make this decision for you. You want to have as much agency and make as many of these decisions as you can. If you have a business, if you have a small business, you can also say, this is going to be, who might not be a family member. It might be a business partner. It might be somebody who you trust, who has nothing to do with your family. They can step in and take over your business or your business financials for a period of time. So those are all the potential applications. And we'll get to those are documents that are more readily available, say, on the internet. Wills are not something that you want to pull off the internet and DIY. But some of these forms, and you'll see we've got some links at the back, this is one of those things that you can probably put in place for limited reasons. Page 8 are what are called advanced directives or living wills. You hear some of these, the other word you hear sometimes is medical directives. And these, they're used interchangeably. They're often, kind of swapped in. You can use these with a healthcare power of attorney. You can use both documents. An advanced directive is basically saying, here are my preferences for my healthcare. So it doesn't necessarily mean end of life. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are completely incapacitated. But it's giving your family, and it's giving it's a document that says, I don't want to have a tube feeding, or if I have a closed head injury, here are the things that I want to have happen, and here's the things that maybe I don't want to have happen. And when you go through these documents, they can be kind of technical, and if you're doing these on your own, or if you have a friend who's an RN, if you have, and some of these forms will become somewhat self-explanatory, but sometimes it's like, these are very technical terms. Do you want food? You want a food tube, or do you want to just be on, say, hydration and food tube? Yes, but I don't want to. If I have no brain activity, I don't want you keeping me alive. Like I want, so some of this is fairly technical, but you want to think about some of those things. And if there's some people's religious beliefs are very cut and dried. They're like, these are not things that within my belief system I want to have happen. And it can be extremely, extremely traumatic for the family if there's a medical intervention that goes against your belief system. So that's something that you really want to think about. A living will, again, sometimes these terms are interchangeable, but those tend to mean end of life decisions, like the really big, not just are you going to keep me resuscitated for a while, it's if there's no brain activity, if I'm in a coma, if I'm completely paralyzed and I will never, it's a closed head injury. Those are really end of life decisions. Again, and what it also does is it helps your family out. No family member wants to make this decision, and they don't want to guess they don't want to feel responsible about for making that decision. And I am talking too slow. So we'll kind of speed this up a little bit. Number 9 is transfer on death. These are the easy peasy ones. These are the DIY one. This is where you can say, and this can be not only your bank accounts, but it can be your car titles if you don't have a loan on it, if you own your car free and clear. This can be any asset. Pretty much any asset upon your death can transfer if it's titled. And this will mean that it stays out of the probate. It stays out of court. So the day after you pass, whoever you designate can go to the bank and they can take possession and have control of cash, which is extremely important because if they freeze your accounts and you got to wait 30 days for the probate estate to open, somebody's got to pay your bills, feed kids, all of those types of things. Key considerations there, you can't have a minor be a designated beneficiary. So it has to be somebody other than a minor. And you can read through here too. POD and TOD are pretty much the same thing. And if you have questions about that, you can kind of see how, and there's a list too. Bank accounts, real estate, retirement accounts, life insurance policies, vehicles, all can pass. Number 10, I'm going to go through this. I've already kind of talked through this. Probate is that court proceeding that is going to make sure your will is followed, or if you haven't planned, is going to make decisions for you. You can kind of read, and we've already talked through this, so there's not much more to add there. I'm going to let you also read through 11. We've already covered most of this. Not having a plan is worse than having maybe a small plan. Failing to update the plan. One thing about beneficiaries, and we'll get to that slide next, if you do have, say, a retirement account from work, or if you have a life insurance policy, you want to be sure those forms can be different depending on, like one form is not going to cover all of those. If you have an asset that has a specific beneficiary, you're going to need to make sure you get the form and the document that's required for that to pass to your beneficiaries. So if it is life insurance, which even if you get a small amount of life insurance I'm a huge proponent of, even if it's a smallish amount, while you are younger and in better health, now is the time to get it. If nothing else, it'll cover your burial, maybe some of the debts, and we'll get to a page here on debts. What'll happen when you pass is your debts that haven't been resolved get paid out of your estate first. So even if you have money in the bank, you may have your creditors come and they're going to get paid before your beneficiaries, i.e. your kids. So if you can put some small amount of life insurance in place, that's going to immediately, and it's not taxable. So let's say you have $25,000 or $50,000, and usually it's fairly affordable when you're young. and you just keep that in place, that can pay off your debts. It can make sure that I mean, I don't know if anybody has gone through a funeral. To have the most simple funeral is usually 10 grand. 12, 15, 18, 20. I mean, it's amazing how expensive it is. So you could wipe out your entire savings having the funeral. So that would be, one of the things you're going to want to do is make sure that your beneficiary forms are filled out and that the names on them are updated and they are who you want things to go to. So again, relationships change. Make sure the people, if you've gone through a divorce, make sure that you don't have beneficiaries on there from a prior relationship. Okay. On page 12, I do want you to take a look at this. This is the list of things. This is kind of a roadmap to what happens to debt. So one of the things that can be important is your estate is going to pay your debts first before it goes to the benefit of your kids. So, and if you have mortgages or if you have car loans, they get paid first. They will come and either repo your car or they'll come and sell the house. That they are secured debtors. So that's going to be one of the things that you're going to want to think through. What happens on my debt, upon my death? And this is where you have to have a little bit of, planning. It may be that you could have your house, you may have a life insurance policy that would pay off your house, and then the kids could stay in your house, or family members could stay in your house. But that's where some of that planning comes into play. Let me see. On page 12, number 3, if you can, and God forbid, if you have an illness, and if you have a diagnosis that you need to start doing some planning around, or you have a scare, that's an important time to sit down with a lawyer, because then there are some things. Maybe we can transfer things into trusts that would protect some of those assets. Maybe we can reduce some of your debt prior to death so that your kids have something, or your family has something after your passing. Again, life insurance for debt coverage, very good idea. One thing to realize, joint accounts and co-signing, if you co-signed on your kid's, car loan, when you pass, some of those assets, if he doesn't make that car payment, could come out of your assets. So that's one of the things that you kind of want to think about. The other thing, I'm gonna run through 13 and 14. Really the purpose of that is Kansas and Missouri. This is an example of just how different the two states can be. They even pay off debts differently, and they protect certain assets differently. So if somebody tells you, yeah, I know this happened to my friend in Kansas, it may be different in Missouri. So just know that there's a difference between the two states. Page 15, one thing that should give you some comfort, because sometimes scary creditors will tell you this, your family, unless they've co-signed on your debt, will not be responsible for your debt. And some creditors will just lie to you, and they'll be unethical. Unless there is that your family is legally bound, many of your debts will pass with you if your estate can't satisfy those debts. So don't let somebody tell you, that you've got to pay off the debts of somebody who's passed. Some of the things that you can do to protect that, again, is some estate planning around trusts. If we can move some assets into trusts, they may not be exposed to creditors in the same way. Let's see. This is in 16 and 17. This is pretty dense. What it's basically putting you on notice of is Medicaid in certain circumstances can make a claim against your estate. However, if you've got kids that are under 18, Medicaid cannot come. So let's say you have a prolonged illness and Medicaid has paid $100,000 for your care. If your kids are minors, Medicaid cannot come in and still make a claim against your estate. That can be important if you've got a huge bill. it's again kind of beyond the scope of this talk. Excuse me, not even 18, it's 21, if your kids are under 21. If you, God forbid, are diagnosed with something that you know is going to be a long-term illness, say cancer, you're going to want to get to a lawyer to start structuring your estate to protect it if you can, and to protect your kids, because there are certain protections that, if, for example, if your kids are in their home, this even the Medicaid might be able to put a lien, they might not, but they can't come in and take the home to pay off a Medicaid lien. So you're really going to want, if you have a diagnosis, that's going to be a time where you think you might have some Medicaid debt exposure. It's worth paying a lawyer rather than paying Medicaid. And you'll see that on page 17 as well. Fairly complicated, but just to put you on notice that could be an issue. And then 18, getting started, and this will dovetail with your workbooks. This can all be overwhelming, and it's a lot. The place to start, or one of the places to start, is to just kind of start walking through this. First thing, get an inventory of your assets. And that can even mean walking through your home and taking video, like taking pictures of things, having some kind of a record for, these were my assets, taking pictures of jewelry, taking, having a journal of where your assets are. That helps for you to keep an inventory of things, but also if something happens to you. The other thing is, these are difficult decisions to make. It's not easy to even think about, let alone make these decisions. So part of this process is defining your wishes and goals and who the decision makers should be. Who do you trust? Who's earned that trust? They may have different people for different roles. What would be your goals for your kids, for where they would live? What's more important to you? That takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of emotional work. So starting that process, consulting with professionals, even if it's just identifying maybe an attorney that you can work with, or a financial advisor. Sometimes places of employment will offer some of these services. Review and update your beneficiary designations. I can't tell you how often this happens. You get out of an awful divorce, and it doesn't even occur to you that this person 10 years ago was put on your 401k at work or your life insurance policy. And if it was a difficult relationship or an abusive relationship, you might not have been in a position to even change it. And so it's you get out of this traumatic relationship, and you might not even have the documents anymore. So really think about, if you have assets that have designations, if he's still on your bank accounts, go back and make sure you get those changed. Make sure that he's no longer a beneficiary if that's your situation. The other thing, discuss with your family. That can be a whole thing. But if everybody knows what your decision is and you feel comfortable sharing that with them, they may be more willing to not fight against your estate. You can explain yourself, and you're going to have less hurt feelings. You'll have less infighting. If they won't listen to you, then they're probably not going to be involved in your estate anyway, hopefully. And then store documents very carefully. One of the things you're doing is you're putting together an inventory of all your assets. You do not want to leave that laying around. That's not just for everybody to know. So either a safety deposit box, a safe that is somewhere that's can't walk away, but put it in a safe place so that you haven't given someone a roadmap as to where all your stuff is. And then the last page is 19 and 20. Again, unfortunately, under my ethics rules, and what that means is I can't give you legal advice unless you are engaged as an attorney with me as your attorney. So I can't say this would work for you. That would be irresponsible. But these are some resources in Missouri, and then also in Kansas. There's some links. There's some resources to pull documents. It's basically to get you started. I used to work at Legal Aid when I was in law school. I know that can be a difficult thing to navigate, because literally they have hundreds of people on waiting lists. But it's not a bad place to start, to see what their resources are, or to maybe see if there's seminars that you can get into. So I think I went over a little bit, not too bad. But now we can go to the Q&A, and I can, happy to answer specific questions.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Life Mission. I'm going to say here that everyone that is attending tonight, by the first of the week, I will send you the whole presentation electronically, so that way you can click the links in the resource pages and get to them easily. But what I do suggest is that this entire packet you keep with your blue book that we gave you tonight, that you're going to be filling out with important information, because Pascal gave you an overview. You're not going to remember all of it, but if you can go, if you get in a jam and you can go to the handout she's given, you'll be refreshed on some of the information she told you, plus she's got the facts there for you. So suggest we do that. We're going to go off camera, say goodbye to YouTube and Life Mission, Q&A at both locations. Thank you.